I said, hold it right there, soldier. Where do you think you're going? I need to see your identification now. I don't care who you are. When I say stop, you stop. Now get over there now.
Blue and red lights bled across the cracked asphalt as Sergeant Marcus Hale's hands froze mid-air, palms open, chest rising in slow disbelief. He had just stepped out of his truck after a 12-hour drive home from deployment. The small-town air smelled of rain and old gasoline, but now it stank of something sharper. Accusation. Step out of the vehicle. Now. Officer Trent Mallory's voice cut through the drizzle, cold and coiled with suspicion. Marcus turned, muscles tight under the weight of a uniform jacket still folded on the passenger seat, his army insignia catching the faint glow of the cruiser's beam. I just parked. Don't move. The shout cracked like a gunshot. The barrel of a service pistol stared him down. Raindrops slid off its dark muzzle. Around them, curtains shifted in quiet houses. No one came out. No one ever did. Marcus felt the sting of metal cuffs before the pain in his wrists registered. Knees on wet pavement, gravel biting through his jeans. The officer's breath hovered near his ear, thick with contempt. Another tough guy from the city, huh? Mallory muttered, shoving him forward. Marcus stayed silent, the taste of rust on his tongue. He'd faced Taliban snipers, bombed convoys, and the scream of dying men. But this, the disbelief in the eyes of someone sworn to protect him, felt worse. Then Mallory opened the glove compartment, searching for evidence, and froze. A small velvet case lay inside. He flipped it open, a Medal of Honor gleaming under the cruiser's light. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Mallory's breath hitched. Marcus lifted his head, eyes steady despite the cuffs. Still look dangerous to you? The rain kept falling. The radio crackled. And no one moved. The rain hadn't stopped for hours. Streetlights turned each puddle into a mirror, fractured reflections of a town too quiet for the storm it held. Sergeant Marcus Hale drove through the last stretch of highway with the windows slightly cracked, the scent of wet pine filling the cab. His body ached from the 12-hour drive, but the ache was good, a reminder he was almost home. The radio mumbled a country song he didn't know. He tapped the wheel once, twice, a soldier's rhythm. Ahead, a cruiser idled on the shoulder, lights dim. He didn't think much of it until those same lights flared alive in his rearview mirror. Marcus slowed, signaled, and pulled over. Routine, except routine felt wrong tonight. The officer approached, flashlight cutting through rain. Marcus lowered his window, careful, respectful. Evening, officer. License and registration. The voice was sharp, mechanical. Marcus handed them over. Everything okay? You were swerving. He wasn't. The GPS still tracked a perfect line home. I've been driving a long way. From Fort Bragg. The flashlight paused on his face, then his hands. Step out of the vehicle. Is there? Step out now. Marcus obeyed. Hands visible. Rain slid down his neck. Turn around. Metal cuffs clicked before he could speak again. Cold bit into his wrists. Sir, I'm not resisting. Quiet. The officer's name tag read Mallory. Marcus's pulse hammered. He kept his eyes forward, checking for drugs. Or weapons. You military guys like to carry. I served. Not armed. Sure. Mallory's smirk was faint, almost invisible in the rain. Marcus saw the curtain twitch across the street, a shadow moving, recording. The phone glowed like a witness. Minutes passed. Mallory searched the truck. Under seats, glove compartment. Then silence. The velvet case lay open in his palm. Mallory's eyes fixed on it, confusion warring with disbelief. This yours? Marcus nodded once. Medal of Honor, Mallory read under his breath. Voice hollow. The rain filled the space between them. Mallory hesitated, then uncuffed him. Slow, awkward, pretending control he'd already lost. Marcus flexed his wrists, red lines across brown skin. You done? His voice was calm, too calm. Mallory looked away, lips tight. You can go. Marcus stepped closer, steady gaze pinning him. You ever look at someone and see only what you fear? Mallory said nothing. Marcus took back the medal, closed the box, and walked to his truck. The camera light from across the street followed him, proof that silence could still burn. He drove off, Rain still falling, knowing this wasn't over. Behind him, the cruiser stayed parked, lights flashing, officer frozen, history already recording. By dawn, the storm had passed, but the damage had only begun. Marcus woke to his phone vibrating endlessly on the nightstand. Missed calls, unknown numbers, notifications stacked like shell casings. He rubbed his eyes, the glow from the screen blinding after the darkness of his room. Lena stood at the doorway, robe half-tied, hair still damp from the shower. "It's everywhere," she said quietly. "What is?" She handed him her phone. A video filled the screen, grainy, shot through rain. A police cruiser's lights pulsed red-blue over the words. Black veteran arrested by local officer. The clip showed everything. The cuffs, the tone, the silence. Then the Medal of Honor glinting in the officer's hand. Marcus watched himself on the screen, calm, restrained, humiliated. He watched the part where he asked, "Still look dangerous to you?" And the camera jerked upward like the world had gasped at once. By morning, it had 1 million views. People are calling from CNN, NBC. "Even BBC," Lena said. Her voice trembled, not excitement, but dread. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on knees. "Turn it off," she didn't. "They want your statement." "There's nothing to say." "Marcus, I just want quiet." But the quiet was gone. Outside, news vans idled down the street. Neighbors stood in clusters whispering. The same town that once saluted his uniform now looked at him like a headline. The police department's press release came that afternoon. Routine stop. Standard procedure. The officer followed all safety protocols. Marcus read it twice, jaw tightening. "Safety," he muttered. "Whose?" Lena placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did nothing wrong." He looked up, eyes shadowed. That doesn't matter anymore. The footage spread faster. Comment sections divided like fault lines. Soldiers defending him. Others twisting it into politics. Some praised his composure. Others called him dangerous, angry, threatening. That night, the local news aired the department's interview. Mallory appeared on screen, suit pressed, eyes rehearsed. "I acted within protocol," he said. "I didn't know who he was at the time." Marcus stood in the living room, fists clenched. The reporter asked, "Would you have acted differently if you'd known?" Mallory hesitated. "Probably not." Silence filled the room. Lena muted the TV. "They're trying to bury it." Marcus turned away, pacing. "They always do." His phone rang again. "Unknown number," he answered, voice low. "Sergeant Hale? This is Laura Patel from Channel 8. We'd like your perspective." "I'm not your story," he said, and hung up. But stories don't wait for permission. That evening, he opened his social feed for the first time since returning home. Messages flooded in. Brothers in arms, strangers, racists, supporters, threats. "You make us proud, soldier." They always fear what they don't understand. Stay in your lane. Should have listened when told to comply. He scrolled until the words blurred, until every message sounded the same. Noise disguised as concern. Hate disguised as order. Lena's voice broke the silence. "The mayor's office called. They want to meet." "Why?" "To calm things down." Marcus laughed once, dry. "They want to protect the town, not the truth." He went outside. The night air was cool, electric. Across the street, the same porch light where the video had been filmed still glowed. He imagined the teenager who'd recorded it, shaking hands, blurry focus, and felt something shift. That recording wasn't an accident. It was proof. Inside, Lena called out, "Come in, it's late." Marcus didn't move. He watched the sky flicker with distant lightning, his reflection in the wet pavement beneath. He whispered to no one, "If they won't tell it right, I will." A car door slammed down the block, reporters still waiting. He turned back toward the house, face set, steps deliberate. The next morning, the footage reached Washington, and by afternoon, so did the silence of men who'd sworn never to see what they just had. Marcus sat at his kitchen table, pen in hand, writing his own account. Not for the news. Not for pity. For record outside, the world talked. Inside, he prepared for war. Not overseas this time, but here, where the enemy wore a badge and a smile. The next week unfolded like a slow-motion replay of every lie Marcus had seen, swallowed by the system. The police union released a statement first. Polished, defensive and full of half-truths. Officer Mallory followed department protocol in response to erratic behavior. The subject refused to comply with verbal commands. The subject, not sergeant, not veteran, not human. Marcus stared at the phrasing on his laptop screen. Refused to comply. He replayed the memory, hands open, still compliant. The only thing he'd refused was silence. Lena read over his shoulder. They're rewriting it. They always do. He shut the laptop, the sound echoing through the small kitchen. They'll paint me as a threat before they ever admit fault. Online, the tide turned. Conservative pundits dissected his posture, his tone, his skin. A police blog labeled him aggressive. Anonymous accounts claimed he provoked the officer. Every lie gained traction. Every truth drowned in the algorithm. By Thursday, the mayor's office issued a statement of confidence in the police department. The local paper ran a headline that made Marcus's stomach twist. Veterans arrest under review. No evidence of misconduct found. Lena folded the paper, eyes tight with fury. They didn't even interview you. They don't need to. Marcus's phone buzzed. An unknown number again. He answered, voice clipped. Sergeant Hale, I'm Captain Rudd from the National Guard Liaison Office. Just wanted to say, this situation's getting political. Might be best to stay off media for now. So the military's worried about optics. Just thinking of your future, soldier. My future was cuffed on a sidewalk, Marcus said, and hung up. That night, someone spray-painted traitor on his fence. Lena found it first, hands trembling as she pointed to the dripping letters. The smell of paint hung heavy, sharp. Marcus didn't move, just stared. Call the police, she said. He shook his head. What would be the point? The next morning, 2 reporters cornered him outside the house. Mr. Hale, do you think Officer Mallory was racist? One asked. Marcus stopped. Looked her in the eye. Do you think he would have done it if I looked like you? The microphone lowered. Silence answered. At the station, Officer Mallory stood behind the podium during a press conference, flanked by his lawyer and the police chief. Cameras flashed. I regret that the situation was misunderstood, he said, reading from notes. I was following standard training for officer safety. There was no bias. A reporter shouted, Did you know he was a Medal of Honor recipient? Mallory's jaw tightened. That's irrelevant to the stop. Marcus watched it live, every word like grit between his teeth. Lena turned off the TV. He's protected. Yeah, Marcus said, by the same rules that were supposed to protect me. He walked out to the porch, watching the neighborhood through the humid dusk. Curtains still moved when he passed. The same eyes that once smiled now hid. He remembered Afghanistan, how a man could die and be forgotten by morning. Here it was slower, cleaner, dressed in policy and procedure. Inside, Lena's voice broke through his thoughts. You can't let them do this. I won't, she hesitated. What are you planning? He looked back at the house. At her, at the camera on the table still blinking red from the reporters who'd left it behind. Truth, he said. On my own terms. That night, Marcus sat in front of the lens. No script, no PR team. He spoke plainly. About the arrest. About the silence. About how being honored by the country didn't protect him from being feared by it. He ended with a single line. They can rewrite their reports, but not the look in that officer's eyes. He uploaded it within hours. It was everywhere. The department doubled down, calling his statement inflammatory. The union threatened to sue. But for the first time, Marcus saw something shift in the public's tone. Doubt turning to awareness. And beneath all of it, the same steady rage that had once kept him alive in combat now had a target. Not revenge, recognition. The truth had been spoken aloud. And no one could unsay it. The studio smelled faintly of coffee and sweat. The kind of nervous heat that builds before live air. Marcus sat beneath bright lights, back straight, jaw set. The host's makeup artist had offered to soften the glare on his face, but he'd refused. He wanted the audience to see every scar, every line the years had carved. Lena watched from behind the camera glass, fingers gripping her phone. The producer counted down. 3, 2, 1. The red light blinked on. Sergeant Marcus Hale, the anchor began, voice calm and practiced. The nation knows you as the veteran in the video that sparked nationwide protests. Why speak now? Marcus drew a slow breath. Because silence keeps the lie alive. The anchor leaned forward slightly. What lie? That what happened to me was procedure. His eyes didn't waver. It wasn't, it was fear wearing a badge. The studio went still. Even the crew stopped moving. The anchor recovered quickly. You've said Officer Mallory treated you with bias. Can you explain? I don't need to explain racism, Marcus cut in, voice steady. It explained itself that night. Behind the glass, Lena's throat tightened. The control room director whispered, "Keep it rolling." Marcus continued, his tone measured. Not anger, but fatigue sharpened to truth. He saw a threat before he saw a person. That's what people don't get. Racism isn't always words. Sometimes it's a gun drawn before a question's asked. The anchor tried to pivot. Some critics say your reaction since the incident has been unpatriotic. Marcus finished for him. They love the uniform, not the man inside it. The audience, small, silent, seemed to hold its breath. He went on, softer now. I've been to war. I've buried brothers. I came home thinking I'd earned peace. But here I'm still fighting to prove I belong on my own street. A pause. Sergeant Hale, the anchor said carefully. Do you forgive him? Marcus looked directly at the camera. Forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. And America has a long memory when it wants to. The light above dimmed slightly. End of segment cue. The anchor smiled, that practiced empty smile. Thank you for your service, Sergeant. Marcus didn't smile back. Start by believing us. That'd mean more than thanks. When it ended, the crew clapped politely. Lena rushed to him, eyes wet. You did it, he shook his head. No, I told the truth. What they do with it isn't up to me. Outside the studio, protesters lined the sidewalks. Veterans, students, activists, strangers holding cardboard signs. Honor has no color. Justice for Marcus, we see you. Reporters swarmed. Questions blurred into one endless noise. How do you feel? Do you want Mallory fired? Are you planning to sue? Marcus said nothing. He got into the car and shut the door. By evening, the clip had gone viral. News anchors called it the calmest fury they'd ever seen. His words were replayed across networks. The department issued another statement, this one colder. Mr. Hale's comments are divisive and detrimental to public trust. Mallory appeared on a rival network the next day, flanked by a lawyer. I understand his frustration, he said, eyes heavy, rehearsed, but I feared for my safety. It's tragic this has become racial. Marcus watched from his living room. He feared for his safety, he repeated, bitter. From what, my skin? Lena muted the TV. They're twisting it again. Let them. Let them. She echoed. He turned to her. You can't reason with a system that feeds on denial. You expose it. That's all. Later that night, Marcus received an email from a retired general who'd served with him in Kandahar. Proud of you, soldier. The courage it takes to face an enemy without camouflage is greater than any battlefield honor. He read it twice, then closed the laptop slowly. But courage didn't quiet the noise outside. Protesters shouted his name, cameras flashed, and online threats multiplied. Some called him a hero. Others called him a traitor. He sat on the porch in the dark, head bowed. The cicadas hummed like static. Lena came out quietly, draping a blanket over his shoulders. They're saying your name everywhere, she whispered. Marcus stared at the streetlights. Then they better understand it. She hesitated. What happens now? He didn't answer right away. The air was thick, humid. In the distance, sirens echoed, too familiar. Finally, he said, Now they'll try to break me. Lena swallowed. And if they can't? His eyes met hers. Then they'll break their own illusion instead. The wind shifted. The street went silent. Somewhere downtown, protesters clashed with police. The country was starting to wake. And for the first time since the arrest, Marcus wasn't alone in the noise. He stood, watching the horizon burn faintly orange under the city's glow. Not fire, not yet. But heat building, history's kind of heat. Officer Trent Mallory stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, the fluorescent light buzzing above him. His uniform hung neatly on the hook, pressed, perfect, empty. The same uniform he couldn't bring himself to wear outside anymore. He splashed cold water on his face, watching it drip down, tracing the cracks time had carved. Beneath the sound of running water, a different noise lingered. The chant outside headquarters. Justice for Marcus. Over and over, steady as thunder, he gripped the sink tighter. They don't know the whole story, he muttered. His wife Claire appeared in the doorway, arms folded. Then tell it, he didn't look up. You wouldn't understand. I understand enough, she said. I watched the video, Trent. You looked. She searched for the word, terrified. Of him, he was reaching. For what? His license? Her voice cracked. You aimed a gun at a soldier with a Medal of Honor. Do you even hear yourself? Mallory turned, jaw tight. I followed procedure. She stepped closer, eyes hard. You followed fear. He didn't answer. Outside, the chants grew louder. Claire threw her hands up. You think this will just disappear? You humiliated a man who served this country better than anyone in this department ever will, and you can't even say you were wrong. Mallory's silence filled the room. When she finally left, the only sound left was the dripping faucet. Across town, Marcus sat in a therapist's office for the first time since returning home. The walls were beige, calm, too calm. The clock ticked in slow mechanical beats. Dr. Lowell, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a soft voice, watched him carefully. You've been avoiding rest, she said. I don't sleep much. Why not? Marcus leaned back, eyes unfocused. Because when I do, I see both wars. Both? Afghanistan. And here. The silence stretched. He rubbed his hands together, the phantom pressure of cuffs still burning on his wrists. I keep hearing the sound of rain on asphalt. Then the click of the gun. Same sound as a trigger overseas. My body doesn't know the difference anymore. Dr. Lowell nodded. That's trauma layering, one memory over another. You're carrying both. He looked at her. I thought coming home meant it was over. She met his gaze. Coming home just means the war changes shape. Later he walked out into the humid air, the weight in his chest unchanged. Cameras still trailed him, but he ignored them. His face had become a symbol, one he hadn't asked for. At home, Lena waited with papers on the kitchen table. It's time, she said. For what? Legal action. Civil rights lawsuit. We can't wait for the system to fix itself. Marcus stared at the documents, his name, the departments, the cities. You think they'll let this go to court? They won't have a choice, she said quietly. You didn't pick this fight. But now you're in it. He sat down slowly. Every time I take a stand, someone pays the price. You, me, someone online. Lena reached across the table, taking his hand. Then we make it count. The next day, his attorney, Jordan Price, met him at a diner, a young black lawyer with calm intensity. You've got something they can't deny, Jordan said. Video, witnesses, national attention. They'll push for a settlement, but that's not justice. You want accountability, we go public. Marcus nodded. Let's go public. That same night, Mallory sat alone in his living room, staring at his muted TV. His wife had taken their daughter to her mother's. The house felt like a museum, still, echoing, full of ghosts. On the screen, Marcus's interview replayed. Mallory's reflection hovered beside it, pale and drawn. He reached for his whiskey glass, hands trembling. He's turning everyone against me, he whispered to no one. But part of him, a quiet, unguarded part, knew it wasn't Marcus doing the turning. It was truth. He thought of the moment the metal caught the light, the look in Marcus's eyes. No hate, just disappointment. For the first time, the shame hit harder than the anger. The next morning at the precinct, whispers followed him down the hall. Internal Affairs wants to see you, someone muttered. Mallory walked in, pretending control. The chief didn't look up. Sit down. 2 folders lay open on the desk. You didn't report prior use of force complaints, the chief said flatly. 3, to be exact. Mallory's throat went dry. Those were cleared, they were buried, and now the press has them. He felt the floor tilt beneath him. Effective immediately, the chief continued. You're placed on administrative leave, badge and weapon. Mallory handed them over, mechanical, staring at the polished surface of his gun before setting it down. The sound echoed like a full stop. Outside, protesters still chanted Marcus's name. Across town, Marcus and Lena sat in their car outside the courthouse, hands clasped. She whispered, Whatever happens today, they can't erase the truth. He nodded once. They'll try. Then we remind them. Inside, cameras flashed as he stepped through the doors. A quiet hum spread through the crowd, half awe, half anger. Marcus kept walking, eyes forward. Somewhere behind him, Mallory sat alone in a parked car, watching the same feed on his phone, the chants audible through his cracked window. He looked at his hands, steady, empty, and realized for the first time how small power looks once it's taken away. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and coffee, bureaucracy's perfume. The walls were beige, lifeless, lined with portraits of men who'd never imagined someone like Marcus Hale standing at the defense table, not as a criminal, but as a witness to his own mistreatment. Reporters filled every bench. The hum of whispered commentary replaced the usual shuffle of justice. At the front, the city's seal loomed behind the judge, a bronze emblem dulled by years of indifference. Marcus sat beside his attorney. Jordan Price, spine straight, expression unreadable. Across the aisle, Officer Trent Mallory avoided eye contact, hands folded tight in front of him. His lawyer, a polished man in a dark blue suit, whispered occasionally, but Mallory barely responded. He looked hollow, like someone already halfway erased. Judge Whitmore glanced up. "We're here today to determine whether sufficient grounds exist for disciplinary and legal action against Officer Mallory and the Riverbend Police Department." The air thickened. Jordan stood first. "Your Honor, this isn't about one bad night. It's about a system that treats black men as threats until proven otherwise." He motioned to the projector screen. The courtroom dimmed. The video played again. The arrest, the cuffs, the rain, the silence. Every second stretched like an eternity. The judge watched, stone-faced. Reporters scribbled furiously. Mallory stared down at his own image, jaw clenching when the medal appeared. When the clip ended, Jordan spoke again, voice firm. Sergeant Hale didn't resist. He complied. Yet he was humiliated, detained, and dehumanized, because procedure has become a mask for prejudice. The defense attorney rose smoothly. "Your Honor, the officer acted according to his training. My client perceived a potential threat. The Medal of Honor was not visible until after." Jordan cut in, tone sharp. "You mean after he'd already decided guilt?" The judge raised a hand. "Counsel, one at a time." Jordan nodded but didn't look away from Mallory. "Tell me, officer, what did you see that night?" Mallory hesitated. "A man who wouldn't make eye contact." Jordan leaned closer. "Or a man trying not to move while a gun was pointed at him." The question hung there, raw, electric. Mallory's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. Lena sat behind Marcus, her hands tight in her lap. Each time she looked at her husband, she saw restraint stretched to breaking. Jordan continued methodically. "Do you recall your report stating non-compliant behavior?" "Yes. What behavior exactly?" Mallory's mouth opened, then closed. No words came. Jordan stepped back. "Your Honor, this is what systemic racism looks like. It's not shouted slurs. It's silence that follows when truth asks for details." The judge said nothing. The gallery murmured. When it was Marcus's turn, he rose slowly. Jordan gave a small nod. "Sergeant Hale," the judge said, "you may speak." Marcus faced the courtroom. Not just the judge, but the rows of faces, the cameras, the walls built on centuries of selective justice. "I served this country for 15 years, he began quietly. 2 tours overseas. I've watched friends die so people here could feel safe. I never thought I'd have to defend my honor at home." He paused. "That night I wasn't treated like a man. I was treated like a suspect. And no medal, no uniform, no service can protect you when someone's fear outweighs your humanity." His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Truth carries its own weight. "I don't hate Officer Mallory," Marcus continued, "but I need this city to understand something. This isn't about one officer. It's about the next man who looks like me, the one who won't have a camera, who won't have a medal to make people listen." Silence filled the room. Even the reporters stopped writing. The judge nodded once. "Thank you, Sergeant." Mallory's lawyer whispered something urgently, but Mallory didn't hear it. His gaze had fallen, not on Marcus but on his own hands, trembling slightly. After recess, Jordan presented new evidence. Internal memos, previously hidden complaints, body cam gaps, pieces of a pattern. The department had been warned about Mallory's behavior twice before. Each report had been resolved internally. Gasps rippled through the room. The chief shifted uncomfortably in his seat at the back. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Is that accurate, counselor?" Jordan placed the documents on the bench. "It is now." By the time the hearing adjourned, the city's narrative had cracked. Cameras caught the moment Marcus stepped outside, flashes lighting the steps like gunfire. Reporters shouted his name, but he didn't answer. He just stood there for a moment, breathing in the cold air. Behind him, Mallory exited separately, flanked by his lawyer, jeers following him down the stairs. A protester's voice cut through the noise. "How does it feel to be seen for once?" Mallory didn't look back. That night, news anchors didn't speak in defense of the department. For the first time, the headlines didn't ask if it was racism. They called it what it was. Marcus sat with Lena in the quiet of their living room. She reached for his hand. "You did it?" He shook his head. "No. I just told the truth loud enough they couldn't pretend not to hear it." Outside, the courthouse lights burned against the dark, proof that exposure, not forgiveness, had finally begun to do its work. The city woke to headlines that rattled its foundations. Internal records leaked. Officer. Mallory's misconduct files surface. Police chief under investigation for cover-up. The story was everywhere. TV, radio, front pages, timelines. By noon, Riverbend City Hall swarmed with reporters. Cameras crowded the courthouse steps, microphones thrust into faces that had no answers. Marcus watched the coverage from his kitchen table, coffee untouched. The screen flickered between footage of Mallory entering a side door under escort and an aerial shot of protesters gathering downtown. Lena stood beside him. "It's starting," she said softly. "Yeah," Marcus replied. "And it's ugly." At the precinct, chaos simmered. Officers whispered in corners, phones buzzed, emails vanished. Mallory sat at his desk, or what was left of it. His locker had been emptied into a cardboard box, his badge sealed in a clear envelope. The chief burst from his office, face flushed. "You couldn't keep your mouth shut, could you?" Mallory rose slowly. "I didn't leak anything." The chief jabbed a finger toward him. "Doesn't matter. You're the name they know. You're the face. And I'm the one who's going to have to explain why we buried your file." Mallory stared, disbelief giving way to something darker. Realization. "You're blaming me for what you covered up." "Welcome to the chain of command," the chief said coldly and walked out to face the cameras. By evening, the chief's resignation letter hit the news. A personal decision. The department's corruption, years of complaints, falsified records, quiet payouts, spilled into the open. And Mallory? Suspended, pending trial. The same media that once softened his image now tore it apart. Every past incident, every unreported stop, every whispered accusation, front-page material. At home, he watched his own downfall unfold. His wife hadn't returned. The house was silent save for the endless buzz of his phone. He didn't answer any of it. For the first time, he felt the full weight of the silence he'd once used as a weapon. Across town, Marcus sat in his living room, lights low. The noise outside and chanting, horns, news choppers, bled through the windows. He turned to Lena. "You'd think this would feel like justice. It doesn't?" He shook his head. "It feels like exhaustion pretending to be victory." She came closer, resting a hand on his shoulder. "You made them see." "I made them look," he corrected. "Seeing's their choice." His phone buzzed at a text from his lawyer. Charges confirmed. Mallory faces misconduct and falsification counts. Civil case proceeding next month. Marcus stared at the message. He'll lose his badge. Maybe his freedom. And none of it gives me back that night. Lena's voice was soft. "You're right. But maybe it gives someone else a chance at a different one." The doorbell rang. Reporters again. He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped outside quietly, past the cameras, past the noise. The evening air was heavy with heat and the faint smell of rain. Down the block, a boy rode his bike past the protesters, raising a small cardboard sign that said simply, "We believe you." Marcus smiled faintly. Not pride, recognition. Back at the station, Mallory packed his last few things. As he shut the locker, his reflection in the steel door caught his eye. For the first time, he didn't see a protector. He saw the man the world had seen in the video. Armed, afraid, exposed. The door slammed shut with a hollow clang. He walked out, ignored by the colleagues who once joked with him, saluted him, stood beside him. Every step felt like erasure. Outside, protesters lined the sidewalk. Some shouted, others just watched. A single voice cut through the noise, a young man yelling, "How's it feel to be powerless?" Mallory didn't respond. He kept walking, head down. That night, Marcus's story aired on every major network. Analysts debated policy. Activists demanded reform, and politicians rehearsed empathy for the cameras. But Marcus didn't watch. He sat with Lena in silence, TV dark, house still. "Tomorrow they'll find someone else to talk about," he said quietly. "Maybe," Lena said. "But tonight, they're still saying your name." He nodded, gaze fixed on the dark window, his reflection layered over the flicker of distant sirens. Names fade, but what they stand for, maybe not. He stood, walked to the porch, and breathed in the night. The air was thick, but not suffocating anymore. Behind him, Lena spoke softly. "What are you thinking?" Marcus looked toward the city lights. "That truth doesn't win. It survives. That's enough." The noise from downtown rolled like thunder. Protest, rage, hope tangled into one unbroken sound. And somewhere within it, justice and imperfect, incomplete, but real, so it began to echo. Weeks passed. The protests thinned. The city returned to its routine. Traffic, office chatter, evening news reduced to 30-second segments. But the silence that followed wasn't peace. It was a pause that felt like a held breath. Marcus Hale lived inside that silence. He was back on base, uniform pressed, posture unbroken. But something behind his eyes had shifted. Even the other soldiers noticed it. The way he scanned every interaction, the way he measured pauses before speaking. Trust had become a calculation. In the mess hall, Corporal Dunn slid into the seat across from him. "Heard about the verdict," he said quietly. Marcus looked up. They settled. "Mallory?" "Plea deal?" "Lost his badge." 2 years probation. "No jail." Dunn exhaled slowly. "That's it?" Marcus shrugged. "That's the system." He said it without bitterness, just acknowledgement. After lunch, he walked the perimeter trail, boots crunching on gravel, wind pressing against his shoulders. The world felt smaller now, clearer. Each sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant hum of a helicopter, reminded him how loud truth had to be just to be heard once. That night, he returned home. Lena waited with a stack of mail, official letters, thank you notes, invitations to speak. "People want to hear you," she said. He sifted through the envelopes without reacting. "They don't want to hear me. They want to feel good about hearing me." She didn't argue. "So what do you want?" Marcus stared at the window, his own reflection overlapping the city lights. "Quiet," he said finally. "Real quiet. The kind that doesn't come from fear." Lena stepped closer. "You've earned that." He shook his head. "You don't earn silence. You fight for the right to break it." The next morning, he stood in front of a small community center on the south side. The same neighborhood where the arrest had happened. Reporters weren't there this time. Just locals, veterans, students, parents. A mural covered one of the brick walls. His image, not as a soldier, but as a man holding his medal in one hand and a police light in the other. The caption beneath, "Honor shouldn't need proof." Marcus stared at it, uncertain. The organizer, an older woman named Miss Renata, touched his arm. "You gave people something to name their pain with. That's worth more than a medal." He nodded once. "Names fade. Symbols stay." She smiled faintly. "Then let this one stay for a while." Inside, the gathering began. The room was small, folding chairs in rows, the air thick with expectation. Marcus stepped to the front. "I don't have a speech," he said. "Just a story." He told it simply. No heroism, no dramatics. Just the facts stripped bare. The cuffs, the rain, the moment the officer saw the medal, the silence after. When he finished, no one clapped. They just stood there, listening still. A teenage boy raised his hand. "Did it change anything?" Marcus paused. "It changed me. And maybe that's where it starts." Afterward, he stayed to talk. People thanked him, shared their own stories, small versions of the same wound. As the crowd thinned, he walked outside again. The mural glowed faintly under a streetlight. Across town, Mallory sat in his apartment, lights off, TV flickering. News anchors spoke his name with the same detached cadence they used for the weather. He didn't change the channel. He didn't look away either. For the first time, He understood the loneliness of being seen for the wrong reason, and the permanence of that kind of seeing. Back at the mural, Marcus touched the painted edge of his metal, the rough surface catching under his fingertips. The air smelled like rain again. Lena came up beside him. "You think it's over?" He watched the mural, the quiet street, the world holding still. "It never is," he said. "But I'm still here." Thunder rolled somewhere distant. Not a storm yet, just the promise of one. Lena slipped her hand into his. "Then let's keep walking." They moved down the empty street together, past the mural, past the echoes, into the city that had finally started listening, even if it didn't yet understand. Behind them, the mural caught the first drops of rain. The paint shimmered in the streetlight, colors bending but not washing away. And in that flicker of reflection, honor, pain, survival, Marcus Hale disappeared into the quiet he'd earned. Not by winning, but by enduring. Months later, Riverbend moved on, or pretended to. The courthouse steps that once swarmed with cameras now stood empty. The slogans had faded from the sidewalks. The protests became posts, then memories, but the story hadn't ended. It had only gone quiet. Marcus Hale sat in the back of a classroom at Jefferson High, uniform crisp, posture composed. Dozens of students watched him, teenagers who had only seen his story through phone screens and headlines. The teacher, Ms. Alvarez, nodded for him to begin. Marcus stepped forward. "I was arrested for something I didn't do," he said plainly. "And the only reason I'm standing here instead of in a cell is because someone recorded it." The room was silent. He looked around, faces of every color, waiting. "When people ask me what changed, I tell them nothing and everything. The laws didn't rewrite themselves. The department didn't suddenly find morality. But people started watching, really watching." A girl in the front row raised her hand. "Do you forgive him?" Marcus's eyes flicked down. He took a breath. "Forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. I don't hate Officer Mallory, but I'll never trust the silence that let him act like that." Ms. Alvarez watched him closely, then asked, "So what do you want us to do with that?" Marcus glanced toward the window, sunlight cutting across the floor like a blade. "Don't wait for permission to question power. And when someone's story sounds impossible, believe them anyway." The bell rang, but no one moved. The students stayed quiet, processing what they'd heard. Marcus nodded once, a soldier's gesture, acknowledgement not farewell, and left. Outside, the air felt lighter. The city was still the same, but its silence no longer felt invincible. Across town, in a quiet apartment, Trent Mallory signed a stack of documents. Mandatory counseling forms, employment termination notices, debt statements. His life now moved on paper, not on patrol. His reflection in the window was pale and undefined. On the muted TV, Marcus's face appeared, a brief interview clip about his advocacy for veteran police reform. Mallory turned up the volume. "Justice isn't clean," Marcus said on screen. "It leaves scars. But scars remind us what we survived, and what we refuse to repeat." Mallory stared at the screen. The words hit harder than any sentence could. He switched off the TV, but the echo stayed. That night, Marcus walked home along the bridge that overlooked the city. The lights reflected in the river, rippling like memory, distorted, persistent. Lena met him halfway across, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Another talk?" she asked. "Yeah. High school kids. Bet they asked the forgiveness question again." He smiled faintly. "Every time." They leaned against the railing. Below them, the water moved slow and heavy, dragging the city's noise downstream. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked. "Every day," Marcus said. "And every day I stay." "Why?" He looked out over the water. "Because if people like me leave, the silence wins again." A car passed behind them, headlights sweeping over their faces, momentary, blinding. Then darkness returned. Lena sipped her coffee. "You know, you became the thing they all talk about. Change, hope, all that." "I didn't want to be a symbol," he said. "Symbols don't bleed. People do. But sometimes people need symbols to remember what bleeding costs." He nodded, letting the words settle. From the distance came faint sounds, chanting. Not protest this time, but a vigil, names being read aloud into the night. Marcus recognized some of them, men and women whose stories hadn't been filmed, who never got their own hearing. He closed his eyes. The names kept coming. Lena took his hand. You started something? He shook his head. No, I just stopped pretending. They stood there, silent. Down below, the river carried the city's reflection, light and dark indistinguishable, both part of the same moving current. For Marcus, that was justice, not triumph, not revenge, but truth that refused to drown. Later, as they walked home, he passed a newspaper stand. His own photo covered the front page again, smaller this time. Headline tucked below the fold: Former Officer Mallory indicted on perjury after new evidence emerges. Marcus paused. Lena looked at him. You're not surprised? No, he said quietly. Truth always circles back. It just takes the long way. He folded the paper under his arm and kept walking. The city light stretched out ahead, and imperfect, flickering, alive. Behind him, the wind rustled through the empty streets, carrying faint echoes of the chants, the verdicts, the questions that would never fully fade. In that sound, Marcus Hale heard something close to peace. Not because the world had changed, but because he finally had.